Welcome to Write It Right podcast. In this podcast, we will dive deep into compare and contrast essay. Do you think it is about similarities and differences? Or there are additional hacks writers need to know? Do you know how to build up these essays? Our guest teachers will illuminate plenty of ideas, if not tips, on how to ace writing this kind of essays.
Welcome to the debate. When we talk about advanced academic writing, the comparative essay really is the crucible of critical thinking. Its whole function isn't just to list similarities or differences, but to use those observations to illuminate a deeper understanding or insight about the subject's relationship. We're trying to move from just observing to actually interpreting.
Exactly. And that requires what the source calls complex analysis. It forces us to synthesize information in, meaningful, non-obvious ways. I mean, the real work in these essays is showing why the comparison even matters. That whole so what question. And structure is really where that argument lives or dies.
Given that high bar, the structural choice we make, the way we deliver that analysis is absolutely critical. So our central question today is about that organizational strategy. Does a truly effective academic comparison need that initial deep dive into each subject before synthesis, what we call the block method? Or is that immediate integrated comparison of the point-by-point method essential to avoid superficiality from the get-go?
And I'll be arguing that the point-by-point approach is, frankly, the superior strategy for getting that enhanced cohesion and nuance you need for serious thesis-driven academic work. It makes the connection itself the central unit of analysis.
And I'm going to maintain that the block method, by prioritizing a comprehensive overview and just a cleaner structure for each subject on its own, provides a much more defensible foundation. You have to ensure subject integrity before you can synthesize. So my position is that the block method just offers the clearest and most robust foundation, especially for a reader who's, encountering this comparison for the first time. By dedicating a whole section to subject A, a real deep dive, before moving on to subject B, we ensure a comprehensive overview of each subject's individual character and its context. For instance, if I'm comparing, say, the philosophy of labor in The Great Gatsby with Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations, two very complex subjects, the block method lets me fully establish the context of Fitzgerald's critique of the American dream before I even bring Smith's market theories into it. This structure, it demands dedicated paragraphs to analyze all of subject A completely, and that prevents the premature mixing of points that can frankly just confuse the reader. Then the actual comparative argument gets rigorously synthesized in the conclusion, which is crucial for drawing explicit comparisons and contrast and showing the significance. It just provides necessary clarity.
I'm sorry, I don't buy that foundational clarity outweighs the inherent risk of analytical delay. For any essay that's aiming for those deeper insights that a strong thesis demands, the point-by-point method is superior precisely because it requires integrated comparison from the very first body paragraph. The structure itself, its design, addresses specific comparative points, let's say the role of consumption in both texts, one at a time, forcing you to discuss both subjects in the same analytical unit. That integrated approach is, it's essential for fostering enhanced cohesion and nuance. The block method, by pushing all that comparative heavy lifting to the conclusion, it just risks creating body paragraphs that are little more than summary. First you summarize A, then you summarize B, and that leads directly to the superficial comparisons that we are all trained to avoid. If synthesis is the goal, then point by point does the analysis in real time, which is why it excels in truly complex analyses. I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning, that, a delayed comparison is somehow acceptable, because the block method inherently, by its very nature, postpones the core argument. If the goal isn't just listing facts about two things, but using those facts to make a complex, debatable argument, the North Star of the whole essay, then we have to integrate the analysis immediately. The point-by-point structure makes you focus each paragraph on one shared analytical point. It forces that direct relationship between the subjects to be explored, supported with evidence, and analyzed for its significance right then and there. If my paragraph is about how both Gatsby and Smith see capital, then the relationship between those views has to be argued right away.
That's a compelling point. I'll give you that, though. I would frame it a little differently. I think clarity is a necessary part of analytical rigor. What we're really debating is the best way to deliver the argument to the reader. The block method ensures the reader grasps the full context of subject A before moving to subject B. It gives a comprehensive overview of each subject's internal logic. If we try to, analyze across too many points too quickly, we risk overwhelming the reader with this constant back and forth, and they lose focus. Think about the difficulty. In a point-by-point essay, a single paragraph might jump from a quote from Fitzgerald's narrator to Smith's discussion of a pin factory. If the reader hasn't fully digested the context of Gadsby's literary purpose, that jump can feel really jarring, which is why the source notes that the point-by-point structure can feel repetitive, if not varied, and just lose its coherence.
Okay, I agree that managing transitions is key for point-by-point to work, but the risk of repetition is, I'd say, a stylistic challenge, not a deep structural flaw. The real deficiency is with the block method when you're aiming for sophistication. Look, the source material itself says point-by-point excels in complex analyses, and that the block method risks superficial comparisons. That tells me that for the kind of deep, critical synthesis that high-level discourse requires, the integrated approach is the necessary default. We have to prioritize sophistication, and that integrated comparison is the only reliable way to move past just listing trivial similarities or differences and ensure we're connecting specific details from both subjects to our bigger claim. The block method just makes it structurally too easy for the body paragraphs to become simple summaries.
Okay, let's shift the focus for a second to how the structure interfaces with the thesis. Because really, the structure is there to serve the argument. Regardless of the method, both have to fulfill the requirements of a strong thesis, identify the subjects, state the specific points of analysis, and argue the significance, the so what. The block method lets the structure follow those points of comparison from the thesis very rigidly. You can allocate a whole section to explore all the textual evidence for subject A before you even touch B. So if my thesis has 3 criteria, my essay structure is perfectly divided. All of A on points 1, 2, and 3, then all of B on points 1, 2, and 3. That clear compartmentalization can be incredibly effective for managing large, distinct bodies of evidence.
I come at it from a different way. I think the choice of structure directly impacts how well we integrate evidence and avoid what's called quote bombing, where evidence just sits there without any analysis connecting it. The single greatest strength of the point-by-point structure is that because each paragraph is so tightly focused on one comparative point, you are forced to seamlessly weave textual evidence, whether it's literary quotes or empirical data or whatever, from both subjects into one cohesive comparative analysis. You have to explain its relevance to the thesis simultaneously. This constant need for transitions, using words like similarly, conversely, on the other hand, it ensures a tighter analytical control. The block method, on the other hand, allows you to just describe all of subject A's evidence, delaying the really hard analytical work until much later.
I see the value in that forced integration. I do, especially for making sure the comparative analysis happens in the body paragraphs. However, the block method offers, I think, a superior utility when your subjects rely on really distinct categories of evidence, which happens all the time in cross-disciplinary work. So, back to our Gatsby and Wealth of Nations example. Gatsby is all about literary interpretation, symbolism, dialogue. We can call that interpretive evidence. Smith relies on historical case studies, economic models, data, empirical evidence. The block structure lets me dedicate the entire Gatsby section to establishing the critical framework for reading a novel from the 1920s and presenting my interpretive evidence. Then I can shift to the Wealth of Nations section, clearly laying out the methods for using 18th century economic data before I finally perform the synthesis in the conclusion. This kind of organization maintains clarity when the standards of evidence themselves are so different.
But isn't that a false dichotomy? The challenge isn't separating the evidence types. The challenge is synthesizing them to support the single argument of the thesis. A strong thesis should already account for that difference. In a point-by-point structure, a paragraph on the valuation of labor would have to use evidence from both texts, but the analysis after the literary quote would address its interpretive nature, and the analysis after the economic data would address its empirical nature, and then you would link both back to the common argumentative point. The block structure seems to use the difference in evidence as a kind of structural convenience, instead of grappling with the analytical complexity of merging them. Point by point insists you manage that complexity in the same analytical moment, which to me demonstrates a higher level of intellectual control.
It sounds like we agree that managing diverse evidence is crucial, but we disagree on the best structural mechanism to do it. I still believe that intellectual charity, being clear for the reader, demands that you establish context first. And in a complex comparison, that context is subject-specific.
Right, and the material suggests the best method depends on the topic and the argument. I'll grant you that. But because complex analysis demands we identify nuanced similarities and differences to get to a meaningful interpretation, the point-by-point method is just inherently more suited to the default rigor of academic writing. It forces that interconnected analysis to be the priority. The block method's use feels limited to simpler comparisons, or, cases where the subjects are so different that an immediate point-by-point comparison would be impossible, which, honestly, might suggest that the subjects are too far apart for a good comparison in the first place.
I see why you feel that point-by-point should be the default, but let me offer a different perspective, one that's focused on the planning stage. The outline is the key step that comes before you even choose a structure. It's often suggested that a good writer should try outlining using both methods, mapping the arguments, identifying the comparisons, to see which one feels more natural and helps a reader best understand the argument. This suggests that the structural rigidity is maybe less important than the commitment to clarity in the pre-writing stage. If, when I'm planning my Gatsby and Smith essay, the block outline just immediately presents a clearer, more persuasive path, then forcing it into a point-by-point structure risks obscuring the argument.
That's a fair point about intellectual flexibility. Both methods do require you to stick to the essentials. Develop a strong thesis that answers the so what question, use good transitions, and don't give unequal attention to your subjects. I agree. But when all those things are equal, the point-by-point method guarantees the comparison happens in the body where the evidence and analysis live, rather than being pushed off to a summary in the conclusion. The body paragraphs are the core unit of argument in any essay, and if they aren't actively doing comparative work, then the essay is, in a sense, failing its main job.
So, to summarize my position, the block method remains a deeply valuable and I think often necessary structural strategy, particularly when the full context of very distinct subjects has to be appreciated before any synthesis can happen. If it's executed carefully with a strong conclusion that really focuses on significance, it provides a clear, defensible roadmap that prioritizes subject integrity.
And while clarity is obviously vital, the ultimate goal of a comparative essay is to illuminate significance through complex analysis. For truly sophisticated academic work, the point-by-point method's insistence on integrated comparison and its proven ability to create enhanced cohesion just makes it the most effective tool for developing a clear, debatable argument. It ensures the analysis is active, not deferred.
Ultimately, I think we can agree that both structures provide a viable path for building a persuasive argument and avoiding those common pitfalls like superficiality. The key, as we've both said, is to move beyond just description and consistently use specific evidence to focus on the significance of the comparison.
Agreed. That commitment to integrated analysis, regardless of the overall structure you choose, remains the non-negotiable step. And there is, clearly, much more to explore in the principles of academic structure.
I hope the podcast has been illuminating and helpful. Compare and contrast essays are a long haul. They require a solid thesis, a well-designed structure, clarity with why this comparison matters, and of course, many pitfalls to avoid. Do not forget to hit that subscribe button and see you in the next podcast.